I'd argue that something is happening about it. I think PPI is a good example of that, that's got wrong, that breaks down trust with the customer, that's been an industry issue. I think that is causing banks to look at the way they do things. Steve's just alluded to that. Lloyds is no different to that either. We have a different strategy. We do use Net Promoter Score as well. That's in, key people's balanced scorecards, including mine. So, I think things are happening, but, we have to understand where we're starting from, and that it's going to take a bit of time to do that. So.
I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think I have kind of a couple of observations. I don't have an answer. I have just a couple of observations. My first observation would be that when the sun is shining, people don't worry about getting sunburnt until they are sunburnt. And the reality was that when money was pretty plentiful and people could borrow at 1% to finance a newsagents in Highbury, they weren't really that troubled about trust or any of those facets at all, or customer service or anything. For them, it was just about the price of money. So I think people's perception of what's important to them changes very much with the environment they happen to be in. So trust and empathy and the ethical and professional standards of banks are currently therefore in the spotlight, because people feel battered and bruised by some of the after effects of being in the sunshine for too long. That's not to say that the banks didn't contribute to that. I often say to people that it was a very riotous party, and the banks bought the booze along and drunk it with everybody else. But actually, the customers were there having a good time as well. So I think you have to reflect on the lessons you learn. PPI is a great example, and there are plenty of others as well. But at the same time, you can surround yourself with statistics and minimum operating standards and SLAs and all these other bits and pieces and net promoter scores, and I am surrounded by PowerPoint presentations on all of the above, and actually nobody could really tell me, if I go into a branch and ask them how many customers they got, they haven't a clue. They can tell me how many mortgages they might have sold today, but they actually don't have any idea about how many customers they've got. So although I'm surrounded by all this information, actually it clearly isn't the way the organisation functions. And I think you have to, somebody taught me a few years ago that you kind of have to focus on 3 important things and stick to that, and then when you've done those 3, you can worry about another 3. And I think, we have to have some really simple customer satisfaction metrics that everybody gets and can easily be translated. There's a great story from Enterprise Rent-A-Car where the CEO talks about the fact that everybody went along to conferences and nodded their head vigorously about trust and customer satisfaction and said it was a good thing, but they were incentivized around number of days that the cars were in use and the average price per day that the car was in use. Until he changed the incentive scheme around the fact that it didn't really matter about how many days the car was in use or what the price was. If the customer satisfaction score was an 85%, the unit didn't get a bonus. At that point, people stood up and paid attention to it. And I think organisations can structure their incentive schemes to make customer service and customer experience, a something that everybody shares. And actually, you do get to that only ask once environment. But you've got to make it simple and maybe less complex.
I mean, trust is at the heart of the banking system. If we don't talk about trust, we don't talk about one of the key issues at the heart of the banking system. Trust in the banking system to move money around, to have to trust their advice, have to trust the information they provide to them. It is fundamental to the industry, so we should continue to talk about it because it's a key principle of the business. But many things have happened to shake the trust in the banking system at the moment, right? And some of those are in individual bank controls, some of them is in the basis of regulation, some of them, is a much wider issue than just individual trust between a bank and a customer. And that the trust in the system has been shaken. So I think it's right that the measures should be put in place to fix those issues, but I don't think the issues will ever go away.
Mike. So I've probably not much got time, but I'm just putting the finishing touches to a white paper on trust, so leave me your name and I'll make sure I'll send you an early copy. I could speak for hours on this one, so I'll just pick up on 2 things. So on the Net Promoter Score, you're absolutely right. Isn't it interesting, and I haven't got statistics to hand, that by and large, PPI aside, the level of customers complaining about their banks is not growing. but the number of people who would recommend their bank to family and friends has fallen to an all-time low. So that tells me something about the banking system. I love your idea of measures, and the idea of measuring, customer satisfaction. We've been talking about that for 30 years. I think there are a couple of points I'd make which we can pick up afterwards. Is how many customers, the first question is, do banks trust their customers? Because trust is a two-way thing. And actually, I fundamentally don't believe in the way in which banks treat customers, that banks show that they trust customers or give customers trust. And just think about how hard it is to ID and V yourself, or identify and verify yourself in so many different ways, in so many different channels. And we can all think of examples where perhaps we've got a problem with the bank, and we've made a bank for a long time, but have a big hard task about it. The piece about measure is not about customer satisfaction, being clear about what your promise, your commitment is to the customer, and measuring that you deliver that.
Okay.